Hello, gorgeous everyone. Thank you again for tuning in to today's episode. We were just sitting a while and discussing what topic we want to talk about, and we chose shame and desires. I'm also like a bit curious, like where are we going with this? And at the same time, I feel like there is a lot of angles. First of all, there is a lot of parts that very much resonate from my own life that I think are important to talk about. And then I also obviously have a lot of things to say about what it actually does within ourselves if we are keeping holding on to shame and not following our desires, for example, like the limiting. Um, yeah, and I think we also take an angle from where is that even coming from? Like why do we have where is our shame coming from? Where are the desires? How are they created? Things like that. Me personally, I think it's an interesting topic to talk about because I do realize, even though I've worked a lot on this whole topic of shame, I realize I still hold on to shame quite often, or like it's often in my subconsciousness, like this internal voice. I'm sure I'm not the only one here that has an internal voice that is often like, let's say there's a situation where I'm with my friends and I say something which I shouldn't have, and I leave this scenario, go back home, and I just feel like this heaviness within my body. And I'm like, what's going on? Tuning in and listening, I'm like, okay, I feel shame. I'm shaming myself still now, hours after this incident happened. That has been me many, many times. And it took a while to even recognize what was going on. Like, why did I feel this heaviness and this like discomfort and what was going on with my internal voice? Because I think like the internal voice can be quite hidden. We don't even notice that it happens, and it's just in the subconsciousness all the time. And yes, I kind of this thing of feeling shameful for my sheer existence, which I have to say is a very cultural thing, I would say, in Switzerland. We are a nation that we apologize for everything. The amount of time I say sorry a day, it's insane. I catch myself all the time. I think British people also do it quite often. But it has this innate feeling of feeling shameful that we speak, that we talk, that we exist, that we move, that we take up space. So there's like this is constantly like churning underneath everything. So for me, it has been quite a long journey to work with it, to shed myself of it, to tell myself over and over again, Jenny, there's nothing to be shameful about here. You said that, that's perfectly fine. You can apologize, but you don't need to carry it around for like days and hours and whatever else. Yeah, so yeah. And I think for desires, I'll come to that later. Let's start with shame. Do you have anything to add on shame, or maybe what has your story and experience been?
Absolutely. I'm going to start with responding to what you said. I don't think it's just in Switzerland. I think it's all over the world. I think we have been trained to not want to take up space. I think that that's like another programming. I think that shame definitely comes from soul memory. Like, where you asked, where does it come from? So, things that came to me when you asked that question was soul memory. So, we have our Akashic records, right? Where we will see in our some people will call them past lives. I call them simultaneous projections because I've been shown that time does not exist because it's all happening at the same time, right? So, in our simultaneous projections, in our soul memory, we hold situations where we have been put in danger because we took up space, or we've suffered a series of consequences and emotions that have made us feel a certain way about taking up space. Um, I think also it can, I mean, I know it can also be carried out through lineages. In my lineage, for example, there is a karma with the feminine that needed to be broken, where I observed that we were shaming each other. This is one that I've broken quite recently, the last couple of months. We were shaming each other for taking up space. We were shaming each other for expressing our needs, not just our desires, our needs. I need to be heard. I need to be seen. These are basic needs. And so, yeah, like I said, soul memory, it can be karmic through the lineage, and then obviously through the experiences that we've had in this lifetime. I'm sure that if not all of us, a very big percentage of us have been shamed at some point in our lives for speaking our truth. This happens to us a lot when we're children. We speak our truth, and then we're told that we need to be more considerate with somebody else, or we need to put someone else in front of us or above us. And so that's how we subconsciously start to shame ourselves and train ourselves not to speak our truths. I think that a big part of how I broke this was, again, it's another blanket statement, but it's not what you say, it's how you say it. As long as you are able to, I think, yeah, observe, from the ego degradation, observe yourself and ask yourself, is what I'm saying coming from a projection? Is what I'm saying coming from my inner child just really needing to be seen and heard and just like, ah? Or is it, a truth that I can maturely express with my emotional intelligence, So, yeah, I think that there is a big part to reclaiming this and our being able to speak our truths. I think maybe we can take it now into desire because we are shamed about speaking about what we want. And I think that this is something that we definitely need to eradicate in ourselves because our desires, as long as they're not coming from ego, as long as they are coming from the soul, I don't believe that there should be any shame around it. And yet again, we are told that, for example, oh, that's too grandiose, like for example, myself, I know that I'm here to do big things. I know that I'm here to serve, and that my journey is expansively becoming more expansive. What a redundance of words, sorry. Um, but yeah, so I was feeling at one point shame for saying that because it feels too grandiose. And then you kind of go into, excuse me, you shame yourself. You go into imposter syndrome. Who the heck do you think you are to be reaching so many people, to think that you're going to make so many changes and make so many impacts? Well, I read my soul blueprint. I talk to my guides. I do all this work. And so I know what I'm here for. Why shame myself for it? And then, yeah, like I said, as long as you're making sure that your desires are coming from a soulful place, it's not that I want to touch many people because I want to become a millionaire and I just want to have this luxurious life. No, that my abundance is coming in because that is my exchange for putting myself in service, right? But it's the motivation behind it is so that everybody can become empowered. Everybody that I can touch, everybody that you can touch. That's why we're in service, right? So as long as we're clear on those desires, I think it becomes easier to stop shaming ourselves for those. Do you want to take it
Hmm.
away?
Yeah, gorgeous. Thank you for that. I definitely have also more to say about desires. Let's see, but there was also a part about shame because I was also thinking, yes, when you were speaking, I was thinking, okay, what has been the latest leftovers where I do feel shame still lingering, and it definitely ha is around speaking my truth or speaking the truth, not even my truth, because as you know, and as well have that ability, we are beings that very much can speak the truth that someone else needs to maybe hear because they're not ready to hear it. Just when I say that, both of my ears shut down and I'm like here ringing, yeah, boo. Um, and sometimes I mean, definitely when I have a client in my space, usually a client does give you permission to speak the truth because they're here to receive. If it happens in my private life, I often have the tendency to check in. I'm like, is this message really for the other person, or am I coming from my projections and my triggers? And if I then still hear, no, you gotta say it to that person, I still sometimes feel shame afterwards because it's hard to see the other person crumbling in front of you because the truth you spoke was so hard to hear. It's like sometimes this reality check. Some people need a reality check, and like this is where it is. Either look at your things or yeah, it's not going to continue like that. So it's hard when you're the messenger of that.
Mm.
Um, and it's not so easy for me when I see I through my words that I have been received to gift someone are hurting this person. I do feel that is still a very hard one for me. Also, because in general, I would say I'm a person that is very direct. I'm very direct. You can speak afterwards. I need to finish my thought. I am a person, I'm very direct to people. I don't hold back. I'm honest and truthful. I would say that those are my virtues. And we are living in a society that often is not honest and truthful. We're not used to people speaking directly. If you're asking me, can I touch your hair? I will most likely say no. Most people, especially women, that we're so used to saying, oh yeah, sure, just to please the other person. So it feels like this innate piece of having to feel shameful for being different, for speaking for speaking my nose, for saying my boundaries, for speaking my truth as well. Sorry, you wanted to say something there?
Yeah, I wanted to say that as you were speaking, what I was hearing is that beautiful fine line that we have, those little hues. In this case, I feel like there's a lot of guilt that is linked to our shame. We shame ourselves because we feel guilty for speaking that truth, for saying, no, don't touch my hair. No, this is my boundary. No, I don't want this. No, I don't want that. We have innately, and I think you brought it to a beautiful close there, because we have been trained to be beautiful, good girls and people pleasers. And so we feel guilty for not doing that, for not continuing, for not perpetuating that, because we start to set our boundaries, because we start to have standards. And so, yeah, it was just that I wanted to bring attention to the fact that sometimes I feel like we might be confusing shame with guilt.
I think they're linked very much and often. I think guilty and shame. I mean, I feel guilty often for me is I feel shame. I know that they're two different words, but I feel like I can actually use them nearly. I think when I feel guilty, I always feel shameful. When I feel shameful, I don't always feel guilty. That's how it is for me. Definitely. I'm also very curious if you have like just because I think if we're talking about the topic of shame, it's really important that we also share our shames because I think especially in a society where there is so many people out there, especially women, we feel so much shame around different topics. I was once at like a woman's circle where we shared about the shames we feel. And that was so gorgeous. So I was just like, let's put some shames into our like center of the bucket, like virtual bucket, and yeah, show ourselves a little bit more naked. Sorry.
You want to hear mine? Yeah. Um, the place where I've found shame has been around my sexuality. I want to say that for what society understands nowadays, I may have been a little bit too early connecting to my sexuality, figuring myself out, but that's just what society says nowadays. Because I mean, if I have my period when I'm 12, then and I can actually have children, then I don't think that 15 years old is too early to be discovering one's sensuality. So I do remember, I mean, this is just going again back on sexual abuse that I have also experienced in my teens. There was a lot of shame put around my sensuality and my sexuality because something did happen. I did have to end up going to the police about it, obviously. And I was shamed by the police. I was shamed by the guardian that I went with, my family member at that time that was my guardian. And yeah. So I also uncovered, again, going back to the fact that we have soul memory, going back to the fact that we have our lineage stuff, I also uncovered a lot of shame in my lineage around this sexuality. Both of my grandmothers, they fell pregnant quite young. And so it kind of clicked also in my story, in my own stuff to work through. Yeah, my shame was around my sexuality. And it's only really been in the last couple of years, especially this last year, hello, I'm 34, that I've really reclaimed that. And I have encountered a massive sexual liberation in which no taboo, no anything, but it is a process and it takes its time. So yeah, my shame was around that, and I had to go through a lot of like an onion, peeling away the layers. And I would have never thought that I would find myself speaking openly about this online, you know? So yeah, I don't know. Maybe all I want to finish saying there is that if I can do it, anyone can do it. We can all do it. But yeah, you wanted to know where mine lays, and mine laid around sexuality.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that's so important to say because there is so many out there, like I said, and our stories are here to touch others to feel like, oh wow. Because I think that is one um very massive piece in this whole shame thing. It gets less when we realize the others are feeling the same.
Mm.
If I know there's 10 people out there that have the same, I'm like, oh, wow, I'm not alone. Okay, so maybe my shame is not that big. It becomes a tiny bit smaller and it
Absolutely.
becomes manageable. Because if it's this massive, huge thing, it's like you don't even speak about it. It's this massive secret. Yeah, it's a little bit too much for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely. That's beautiful that you just said that. You know, as you were saying that, sorry to come in with that. It just occurred to me as I said, you know, I would have never thought that I would have spoken about this online. I also never wanted to speak about my sexual abuse online, you know, and so obviously, without realizing, and I just realized now, I had shame around being abused. And it's
Mm,
incredible that as women, we are the ones that are made to feel the shame when we were the ones abused. There's no shame put on the abuser, if not on the victim. And
mm,
I think that that's far too normalized. But we live in a society where even the penal system, that, you know, in the media, it gets turned around into, oh, but what was she wearing? Oh, but
yeah.
where was she? And what time was it? And was she alone? It was broad daylight, freaking 5 p.m., broad daylight. I was a teenager and it was other teens. And I was wearing my sports clothes because after school I had gym that day. So,
Mm.
so yeah, it's
Like there's stereotypes and throw it in the trash.
exactly.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. I do think I also hold certain shames around sexuality for sure. First of all, like I am coaching people in sexuality and sensuality. I've been mainly like single the last 13 years. So I sometimes I'm like, who am I to tell anyone about all these gorgeous practices that I learned about and that I did, but I mainly did them by myself because I wasn't in a partnership. So sometimes I also feel this shame around not having recurrent experiences with a sexual partner for years. Because I think there's certain aspects of our sexuality that we actually only transmute, realize, look at, like these epiphanies we can have if we have recurrent sexual intercourse with one person and not just with many and different ones. Anyway, not that that's me at the case, but I do feel like sometimes I'm like it feels like I'm a fraud, this feeling of like, who am I to think this way? And at the same time, it's like it doesn't, our society, especially in sexuality, it dictates so much. Like this is the norm, this is how it's right, and this is all weird and different. And I feel like I'm more in the weird and different. Things for me work a bit different, and I would talk about things a bit in a different way. I'm also like the base of my teaching is tantric and Taoistic, so I would also implement those exercises into sexuality, which is actually not about penetration. A lot of it is more about intimacy and connection, and try and talk to about that to normal people. So it does sometimes feel a little bit of a stigma to hold with yourself, and then also being a woman in this world still, and I mean, I feel like actually my surroundings now with this like mesh red thing is very fitting for the topics where we ended up. But yeah, I think there is so much shame around sexuality as a society in a whole. I think that's probably one of the biggest ones that is limiting ourselves from the freedom of living and desiring what we want. We don't even know what we desire. I'll actually come up with that in a second. Um, and yeah, and not we don't speak about those things. So it feels like a lot of tension is created, a lot of like I'm a weird one and I have to hide that, and that just creates a lot of tension. Yeah. But anyway, my mind is now going with like desires, desires, desires. Just because you started talking about it before, and I actually wanted to bring in, but I think like we actually most often don't even know what we desire. And what the example you made is gorgeous, and I'm like, I signed that, and I'm like, wait a second. For me, the problem though starts already before. We're not a society that talks about desires or dreams that much about, I think, or like grounded desires, especially. Like, yes, everyone wants to be a millionaire. That's just like the standard because the money holds such a power. But if you're truthfully looking at it, what is it that you actually want? It might not be that you want to be a millionaire. It might all be that you want to have status and you want to have power and you want to have a gorgeous wife. I'm just seeing like this image of a man, adolescent I was working with who said that. I'm like, I think actually he rather wants to attract a really gorgeous wife, and he thinks the only way he can do that is through having a lot of money and a really gorgeous car. So I think it's also going to the nitty-gritty of what do we actually desire is not an easy one. And I would say in my coaching program with especially with women, that is usually a big topic we talk about
Mm,
when they realize for the first time, like, I don't know what I actually desire and want. If you don't know what you desire and want, how can you follow? How can you speak your truth to your friends, to your partners?
mm,
How can you feel this passion lit up within you because you don't actually know what your desires are? I think it's a actually makes me sad speaking about that.
mm.
Yeah.
Understand. Yeah, I think again, it just as you were speaking, I was just hearing again, that fear of being too grandiose, that fear or that guilt for desiring what you do desire. I think I can't say it any clearer than what I was saying before, and it's simply just because in what I do with my work, be it with the coaching or the mentorship or because I do believe that we need to separate what coaching is and what mentorship is. I think that coaching my personal stance is that coaching is more of a masculine container where you are told to do, if that makes sense. We tell people, how they can or what they can do to go through something. And yet, when we're mentoring, we're opening a space and we're letting whatever needs to come up, come up. Yes, that doesn't mean that we're not guiding and we're not giving, like, I don't know, integration practices and stuff like that. But it's more feminine because we're allowing the person to be constantly, if that makes sense. So just setting that separation there. So whether it's through one of those practices, whether it's through my blueprint reads, or whether it's through the car body activation, which I do, there are all different points in which I focus on soul purpose. And there is also a car channel that we activate that it has to do with really fine tuning the desires, letting go of the desires of the lower mind and really following through with the desires of the soul, because what the soul desires is merely to experience what it's come here to experience, which is your soul mission, your soul purpose. And so as long as it's aligned to that, the desires, I do not think that we should feel shame around them. I work with people to help them overcome these guilts, these shames, and to realize, what your soul wants is what your soul knows that you're here to experience. I love another blanket statement, is that yes, you desire what your soul already knows is yours on another timeline, right? So, yeah, that's kind of what was coming to me when you were speaking. And sorry to take it back to shame for a moment, but as you were speaking, I was hearing that when women are not only shamed about our sexuality, we're shamed about pretty much everything that has to do with our womb. We're shamed about our menstruation. Oh, hide it, don't let it be seen, oh my goodness, you're dirty, you got to cover that up, put a jumper around your waist, so you know And then we're also shamed when we reach menopause. Oh, she's not useful anymore. She can't procreate anymore. You know, you got to hide that. There are so many women that struggle with admitting that they're going through that cycle of life. And again, I will say what I've said in another one of our videos. That cycle of life is just as beautiful and powerful as any other parts of the female life, the feminine life, because it is actually where you are being safeguarded so that you can continue to share your wisdom, right? Otherwise, if we don't share it through the lineages, woman to woman to woman to woman, it gets lost. We're shamed around our womb when, this is something that I heard from my mentor, my womb wellness mentor. She's pretty amazing. She was speaking about one of her mentors that actually told her, you know, women don't need ceremony. We are ceremony. We are freaking initiation. We go through initiation after initiation after initiation with our wombs. And so I feel that the shame that's been put around the feminine with our womb space, whether it be because we use it, because we enjoy it, or because we are going through these different stages of life, is because, again, and I'm sorry, but the toxic masculine patriarchal blueprint that we inhabit wanted to oppress the power that we hold. They're scared of the power that we hold. They're scared of us coming together. They're because again, like just going back to something that this mentor said, it was beautiful. Women are ceremony, but we are ritual, but we are the village, we are the tribe. We are meant to do things together. And so yeah, I realize I'm going off on another one of my tangents, but I obviously felt that that was very necessary to bring through because it was speaking very loudly.
No, I think it's important. Just I think it's always important to look at what are the different roots of a topic as well. Like we spoke a lot about that's where we're at right now. That's yeah, and it's important to say where it's coming from. I spoke a little bit of what it does, as well as in a society as a whole, like both not knowing or not speaking about shame creates tension, but not knowing about your desires also creates tension. So therefore, if you imagine or if you envision a society which is basically a little bit of truth how we're living today, where people don't speak about their shame, they're holding it internal, they don't know about their desires, therefore they're not following it. That is a very tension society that is quite unhappy. I'm just like creating a picture of like if you put everyone in our society into one human, I would see that human as having like a lot of tension, being very dissatisfied, and actually being like this latent. No, that's a German word. Sorry,
Latent,
this
yeah.
feeling of yeah,
Latent. You can say latent. It's underneath. It's latent.
yeah, feeling of frustration is there. So it feels like you want to lash out all the time
Mm,
because because you are hurt on the inside
mm,
because there is this fear, this tension that you're holding with the shame, and at the same time you're not letting out your passion because
mm,
desires for me hold a lot of passion. Like, whew, it feels actually really nice to speak about that. So for me, a way of what we can do in general as a society, as people in our communities, to our friends, is to speak about those topics. And especially for women, it's so important to speak about what are we shameful, like about our bodies. When I was in a circle once where we talked about what we're ashamed of, and we came up with all these things. We have hair in the weirdest spots of our body because we as women have gotten taught that we should be hairless, except on our head. There should be like loads of hair and the most gorgeous and luscious hair. But everywhere else, please don't have hair.
mm,
Ass cracks, don't have hair there. That's one thing, but then it's also what another funny thing that we talked about, and it was so good to talk about that is the pimples we get
mm,
on. We don't just get pimples in our face. I mean, it's very common. We get sometimes also man, we get pimples on our back. As women, we often get pimples in our boobs and on our ass. And that's something we don't talk about. It was just, we were laughing. We were a group of like 10 women. And then one girl said that. And then the other one was like, oh, me too, me too, me too. And then we were just sitting there laughing and just saying, like, how ridiculous is that, that we feel so shameful about of this natural thing our body has. Whereas I think it's really funny. I think men are feel less shame around those things. It just is. It just is. So this we as women got taught that our body has to look a certain way, and if it's not matching that, then we should feel shameful about it. We should change something. That's coming back into another topic that we're not going to go deeper, but that's where like plastic surgery starts. You
Mm.
can get rid of everything. That's where Botox, where creams, the weirdest shit ass creams happen. Nowadays, I constantly get Instagram videos of how to get your curls, and people are using like 15 million products. Yeah. So apparently, at the moment, everyone is supposed to have like luscious curly hair, like intense curls. Even though most people you actually see online, they're using like I don't know what they call these machines. Yeah,
Not even
yeah.
my natural curls are perfect and they're
No,
natural, you know?
no.
I
Yeah,
think that unrealistic beauty standards, they do hurt us a lot, and then they do cause shame, like you said. We
yeah.
are shown constantly, oh, that's actually beautiful what's coming to me. We've come into a moment where we have filters available to us, and so we are trying to, like, it could not be more unrealistic than a filter that fixes your nose, that fixes your eyebrows, that puts on the big lips, that perks you, that does this to your jaw, and then of course you see that on the screen and you're like, oh my God, she's so gorgeous. Yes, she's gorgeous, but she's probably even more gorgeous without the filter, but she doesn't show herself that way. And so then you're trying to hold yourself to that beauty standard that she doesn't even have. Come on. So we shame ourselves. Yes, that's very true. I want to just something came to me as you were speaking, and I don't think that men are so ashamed about their bodies. Yes, there is a lot of culture of taking care of your body, of going to the gym, and for men, it's about being muscular, or at least that you can see it, that you got your abs going on. But I think men are actually shamed in other ways. I think men are shamed so deeply around their emotions, and we know that this is something that women are also shamed about. We're told that we can't be angry, we can't be sad, we can't be erratic, and we can't be too sensitive. But men are too, and so they shut themselves down. They are specifically shamed around these emotions, and they're told to man up. Otherwise you're not a man. Boys don't cry, men don't cry. And in any case, if they're angry, it's justifiable, and yeah. So I think that to say that men aren't shamed, I think that it's a bit too much of a blanket statement. I think that we have to realize that, they do go through their own thing. I really think that we, just so that because I know you and I know, but just so that we're not misunderstood by the viewers, we're not saying that men are always bad or that they're always in the better position. What we're saying is that there is a distorted, toxic, masculine template that is currently being played out in our reality, that is the one that we are trying to heal and harmonize. We are not against the masculine itself. We are not against masculine energy. We're not against the masculines, manifested masculines. When we're speaking about all these things, we're speaking about the distorted template. Just thought that it was important to say that.
Yeah, for sure. I think I'm super happy to even do one episode where we talk about exactly that, like also the amazing masculines we have in our life that are supporting us, because there is plenty of those out there. I think we are not against the masculine, but the core of this podcast is to empower the feminine. So in my understanding of empowering the feminine, it doesn't mean I have to be anti something. I think it's just showing the light of what is actually happening and speaking about the truth. But it doesn't mean that, like you say, it doesn't mean because we see that a lot in feminism, right? That is like very speaking very harshly about the masculine. It's like that's not what we're here to do. Um, and that's why I do like that we emphasize in these talks in general a lot about the shame the feminine is going through, because that's the core of this podcast. But thank you. I think it's still very important that you spoke about that. And I'm like, oh, actually inspired to speak deeper about that. Mm, I'm just wondering, actually, it's also, these two topics are also linked in a different way, like we can feel shameful of our desires.
Hmm.
And I was just like, what desires do I feel shame around? And I assume there is quite a few. I do also resonate a lot with what you said with your desire. I'm also here to build something quite massive. And I do feel, yes, I know what I feel shame around. I realize that I'm not keeping myself up to date with all of the news and what is happening everywhere, because I personally know that if I tap into that, I will kind of just succumb the fear, the sadness, the pain, the grief, because there is so much shit happening in this world. So I choose for myself to keep that to the minimum so that I can function, first of all, but so that I also can follow my path, because I know that my path is actually gonna bring a different angle to that. Not a different angle, it's gonna bring like an ease to all of this. So it's really important for me to stay that, because I do see that we can get lost in following the news and just thinking, oh, the world is so harsh, and feeling like we're such good human beings because we are listening to the news and we're up to date. But actually, we're just stuck in a negative energy that is not leading us anywhere. So for me, I do sometimes feel shame around my desire to follow my path, and choosing at the same time to not go on the street and demonstrate at the moment, because I'm like, this is not my path. And that feels shameful, especially nowadays with everything that is going on everywhere. It feels shameful not to be the one that is on the street, because I'm like supporting anyone that does that, but I personally also know this is not my path. So for me, I choose to follow my path and creating this and speaking about topics like that, because I think this is way more important for me personally. And I don't think anyone that does it in a different way than me is wrong, but that does sometimes feel shameful. Yeah.
Fair
Hope
enough.
that makes.
It does. It makes sense. I've had experiences where I've had confrontations with people that expressed something similar to what you're saying. Similar because they went to the extreme of pretty much denying and saying things like, "Well, it is what we believe. We create out the reality. It is what we believe it is, and I'm not going to feed that. I'm not going to nurture it." And it's just like, dude, you don't have to. What occurred to me as you were speaking, was you don't necessarily have to go out and protest. There are so many other ways of playing your part. I have used for example, I used my Instagram accounts, all of them, to speak the truth of what I understood was happening, for example, in Gaza. I'm also a woman of Afghan descent, and I openly speak about the injustice that is happening, or has been happening for years, for decades in Afghanistan. I speak about the injustice on my social media. No, I don't go out and protest, but I do other things, So I understand what you're saying. I have had this experience where I've had confrontations, and I think that, first of all, I'm also somebody that doesn't watch the news, mostly because it became very, very obvious to me through the pandemic that we were literally being the object of global mediatic terrorism. We were being held by the governments because they control everything, what information comes to us. And so, and I say mediatic terrorism because terrorism, for me, definition is basically to be controlled by fear. If somebody else defines it a different way, I completely accept that, but that's my definition of terrorism. It is control through fear. And so this is why I don't watch the news. I get my news from very independent sources that aren't controlled by governments. But still, yeah, I'm not somebody that goes out and demonstrates, and I don't suffer shame because I find another way to, in my case, what I understand is playing my part, speaking my truth, using my voice. Um, so yeah, that.
Yep. Thank you. I'm kind of getting towards the end here. Do you have another topic that you want to talk about?
No, I
No?
think it's good.
Yeah. Yeah, so I really want to just as a wrap up say that we talked a lot about shame individually today and also desires, how we limit ourselves, how we don't see it, how we especially don't speak about it, and that there is also the combination of feeling shameful of our desires and therefore not speaking about that. And I think that's also a very important topic just for anyone to look at. Obviously, I think if let's leave it in the light side. If you want to comment and subscribe, obviously, as well comment a desire that you have. That can be something really innocent. I don't know. I want my mom to get better again. I don't know, want to buy this nice blouse I saw. It can be anything. What is your desires that you are currently playing around with, envisioning in your life? And yeah, and in just general, I want to say thank you for listening in and yeah, see you next time. Hear you next time.
Thank you, everybody. Do reach out if you are experiencing any shame, because we can help you through that also. All right. Bye.